Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we have a 2017 Ford Escape that's got some wheel bearing noise in the rear. The car only has 36,500 and some miles on it. Unfortunately, I called the Ford dealer and they weren't able to work with me at all as far as replacing the parts under the factory warranty, which expired 500 miles ago. So we're going to put some wheel bearings in the rear of this car. Okay, one of the first things we want to do is we want to pry back this piston in this caliper just enough to give us room to be able to pull this assembly off the rotor and then get it back over this rust ridge on the rotor when we're putting it back together. There's two bolts that hold the whole caliper, including the mounting bracket, to the vehicle, and they're 15mm bolt heads. There's two bolts on the back side. They come in this way. So with the wheel off, there's two bolts right here, one here and one here, that hold this whole caliper assembly onto the rotor. We're going to pull those off. And they are 15mm. Okay, with those two bolts off, we don't want to let this hang from the hose or from the electrical wire, so we're going to slide this up off, and we'll just set it over here, out of the way. Give this rotor a little tap to get it loose. Slide the rotor off. Now there's four bolts that are, you can see one right there, there's one right here on the other side of this bar that hold the hub unit in, and they are unique bolts because they have a Torx head on them. So what you have to do is get one of these reverse Torx sockets, and this particular one is an E14. You can buy these sockets anywhere, pretty much any auto parts store or Harbor Freight or whatever. You can tell I've had mine a long time. They're actually rusting. They don't get used that often. But when you need them, they're great to have. And that's what the head of the bolt looks like right there. It's a Torx. For the ones on the back side, I'm going to put a short extension on my ratchet because they're a little bit tougher to get at. Okay, you'll notice I left a nut on here, and the reason for that is it sandwiches everything together. I'm going to strike this from back here with a hammer to pull this out, and there's a chance if that nut was already loose that this could separate from the actual bearing itself. The nut kind of sandwiches everything together. So let's give this bearing a little tap here, see if we can get it loose. Okay. The axle nut is a 32 millimeter. Okay, here's our new bearing. It's a Timken brand bearing. I want you to look at this right here. It's hard to notice, but there's actually a difference. You can see that these holes aren't symmetrical. So make sure when you put it back on that everything lines up before you tighten anything down. And it looks like these two are going to be our top two based on the marks on the backing plate. I work by myself quite a bit in the shop, so I like to take a big pry bar and stick it in between the wheel studs like that right there and use it to hold my thing from spinning here so I can torque it down with the torque wrench. If you have a helper in the shop, it makes it a little bit easier. You can just have them hold this. Okay, let's slide the brake rotor back on. Turn it, make sure that you didn't bend the backing plate, because if you put it all together and put the wheel on, pull it out, if the backing plate touches the rotor, you're going to be mad at yourself. So always turn it a little bit, it's nice and quiet, so let's go ahead and put the brake caliper back into place. Those two 15 millimeter bolts that hold the caliper on, I find it's always easier to start the lower one first. I could be wrong. That little electric ratchet is nice, but you can't torque anything down with it, so you always got to tighten it down by hand afterwards. All right. And that's all there is to it. It's easy, it's a piece of cake, you can do it too. Thanks for watching.